Yeah. Yeah, I'm good. I'm what is this, our third week in quarantine now? Yeah. No. I mean, it's yeah, I feel as if, if we don't talk about it, it's like a weird elephant in the room. I mean, it's funny, like Gina and I make her like watch YouTube videos with me before we can like watch an actual show at night. And I was like, I do the thing where I like want to watch some sensible prepper videos, but like I don't want to inflict too much of that on her. So I'm kind of like going back and forth. And she's like, no, let's watch that. And then she was like, I think I need to put together like a backpack. And of course, my this is like my fantasy scenario. So I mean, this is all to say though, I think even normal people are starting to consider that the kind of edifice of society is not as robust as maybe we thought it was. First time, yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's not a good metric. Yeah. 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 I don't know. I mean, I also, oh, yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. No, I know. It's really, it's pretty crazy to see how, from a system, I mean, I think people are resilient. Like, this is probably something I've said on here, and the evidence suggests that people are individually very resilient, and like small groups are pretty resilient and creative. But these systems that we thought were like immutable have just been shown to be not resilient at all, fragile, like really fragile. I mean, yeah, I'm also not seeing you. Like your thing is black again. I don't know. I just imagine you though. Are you able to hear me? Yeah. Yeah, I just got a notification from Discord saying they can't. Yeah. Yeah, 30 seconds. Okay. No, it's all good. Don't worry, man. It's totally cool. I get it. We're still trying to find the sweet spot.
How about now? I was fucking muted.
No, really?
Yeah. I was fucking muted on my stupid ass mixer that I got to make my life easier.
The betrayal of tech, man. you know?
Feels good, man. Feels good, man. Now I'm showing up on the meters. Now I'm showing up. I'm showing up. I'm jokerifying rapidly. Yay. We got yays. We got all goods. We got it's happening.
Wow. Okay. There we
Great.
go. Crisis averted.
All right. Wow. We fucking did it. I was getting ready to just shut the shit down. And, whatever. It's Sunday fucking morning. All right. Whatever. Hi, everyone. Hello, people in the chat. If you have anything you want to talk about, it's different. It's different today. We're in a new place.
Ugh.
We're chilling. We're chilling. Getting ready to fucking smoke a joint. Just kidding. Well, kind of. So I don't know if any you guys have probably here since you only heard half the conversation, we'll vaguely restart, like vaguely. Basically, Dr. Nick and I were talking before the show began, and while the show started, is like, how do you talk about anything but quarantine? Because this has become rapidly, it's the quarantine show. How's your fucking brain doing in quarantine? Because we all are quarantined. Society is quarantined because society is sick. And then, and then we were talking about that like, how do you not talk about politics? Like that there is this part of us that's like, oh, I think that's a little bit of an illness of the discourse as well, to be honest, which I think is falling apart in a cool way. Like, the way we are taught to silo off our lives and say like, hey, let's not talk about politics. Like, don't no politics at the dinner table. And especially when it's something like mental health, I actually think this is related to what we talked about last week with like toxic positivity and stuff like that. That
Yeah.
like this idea that don't talk about anything that might be materially affecting your wellness. Just talk about the feeling you have. Try to change the feeling. And on the one hand, I think that's like positive. I think it's like a positive thing to think to yourself, oh, my experience is subjective. My experiences and my thoughts are something that I can affect, my behavior. And that's true. But you know what I mean? It's like saying, it's like there's an aspect of it that's like if you had a big cut on your arm and someone was
Yeah.
like, instead of trying to put pressure on the wound and stitch it up and stop it, we're just going to shoot Novocaine in there and just pretend it's not an issue.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think what bothers me so much about it is, again, to kind of like retrench behind the like assumptions of doing science, is when I feel like I'm talking to someone who has a different point of view, which I love to do, but then, I get the sense that they're just not open to any evidence that might contradict their position. And
Right.
so then I'll like start by kind of asking in the beginning, like, is this something that you would be open to changing your view about if you saw evidence that this view was erroneous?
Yes.
And people just like can't even answer that question. Often it's like,
Well,
no, it's not. There is no evidence. It's all from a fake news source or blah blah blah.
well,
I mean, this is like the videos of Fox News hosts talking about how they've always uh, been consistent that the coronavirus is dangerous, and then like you just watch a video from 5 days ago and they say it's a left wing hoax. I mean, so this is related to the idea that it's very difficult for some people to take in information that demonstrates that they could have been incorrect about a position.
what isn't there
Where
literally like there's a famous study that was like not the Kruger Dunning thing, but the one that's like that there's like like if you are presented with evidence, facts that your point of view is wrong, that it only deeper entrenches your belief.
there are many, yeah, there are a lot of studies that kind of get at different angles of this, but there are some concepts like cognitive dissonance or confirmation bias that point at the notion that it's very uncomfortable for people to hold views that are contradicted by evidence, and so they will make an effort to keep their view and select evidence that supports it or distort evidence that contradicts it. So
Right. Yeah, confirmation bias, right? And there's like
cognitive dissonance is another
cognitive
one.
dissonance. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like a very famous study. I'm like trying to Google it on the side here. It's a Stanford thing, I think. It's old. It's like it was like we'll try and find it. Or if I find it, we'll put it in this week's literature.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, but I think that experience is frustrating on both sides of the line because we're so used to. Somebody said here, by the way, right, what are you doing, Michael Hollis? What are you doing for fun? Because we're in quarantine. Even the escapist topics of TV, video games lead back to the context of quarantine. Yeah, exactly. That's like, this
Yeah,
is the quarantine show. This is the quarantine mental health show. What are you doing to stay sane in this new world? And I will just, I want to keep on this topic that we're talking about, but I want to just retread for the people who, while we were muted, was like one thing we were talking about was that the strangeness of this time, obviously, but that Nick and I, who have always been weirdos, I guess, and like, enthusiastic about societal breakdown, whatever, like possibilities. I don't know. I think I was just saying, I'll just speak for myself that I have been experienced the James Franco meme of like the first time thing with the noose around his neck from Buster Scruggs about everything. Where like my girlfriend and other people who are like, I would say are normies, in a positive way, in the nicest way I could say, people who society as it has been has functioned for them. Like not that it wasn't hard, not that it's not hard, and because it's hard on everybody, it's hard to be a person, but like that, I think it's harder. Maybe this is part of the thing about people who it's hard to show them facts that contradict what they're going in. It might be related to it. Is that like if the system has worked for you, if somehow like you found success through it, even if it was challenging, you overcame it though, you figured things out. I think it's harder to accept that the structures that seem so solid out there, these material realities that affect what our sense of things are, is like it's harder to accept that those might be imaginary or that they might be very fragile or that they could crumble overnight and actually don't have a lot of value and are proven to not. And that it would be hard to adjust to those facts on the ground rapidly because up till now, it's been such a foundation of reality. I think for me, at least, nothing's really ever made sense to me. I remember I like got really broken about money early in my life because like of a couple reasons. One, because there were times when my dad had a lot of money. He was like this personal injury lawyer, and then he had like this mental breakdown, drug thing, and broke some laws and stuff. And then I remember times when like the electricity and the power were getting turned off, and it just seemed so arbitrary. And then personally, I had like this experience of I was like a bus boy at a restaurant. I'd work my dick off all weekend. My feet would hurt. Everything would hurt. I'd barely have enough money to like pay a cell phone bill, and then I'd get a voiceover job where they'd be nice to you for 20 minutes and give you like, do you want water? And then you make like $2,000 to like say something into
right.
a microphone. And I was like, okay, so society makes no sense. Like there's no meritocracy. This has nothing to do with effort. And so things like that, like just fundamentally broke my sense of like things make sense. We're going to, everything's okay. And if you work hard, you'll be rewarded. All these things. So like, and that just added to my general mental state in general existentially, where you're like, well, nothing makes any fucking sense ever. It's all just an idea. And then I decided to be an actor, but I think it was more the other way around. I feel like I had to be an actor because like it was just using your imagination to pretend things were real. And I was like, that's what I feel like I'm doing every fucking day anyway. So now that this is happening, I'm like, yeah. I'm like, first time to everybody else who's like having this existential, like, what do we? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, that's what it always has been. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, I do, and I guess what I'm concerned about. I mean, yeah, makes perfect sense to me. I think it's just the idea that I don't know. To me, I kind of so like the lens I come through is I just feel as if people haven't like read enough history or like history of science. I mean, I don't know why on earth you would think or someone would think that the structures and rules that govern our interactions, that distribute money and resources, that these are somehow like the positivist rules, that we discovered these immutable rules and this is how it should be. It's just what's happening now. I mean,
Right.
it's happening now and it was different 50 years ago and it was really fucking different 100 years ago and it was really different 100 years before that. So the idea that somehow this is the right way is just silly to me, but it seems as if people are invested, the winners are invested in convincing people that it can't possibly be any different or everything would be horrible. I mean, and this is like when I see, I mean, when I see like people posting pictures of empty supermarket aisles with captions like dry run for a Sanders presidency, like this is socialism. I mean, it's just like
You're like,
it's literally
yeah.
unfettered free market that you're seeing.
Right.
Individuals boarding in an unfettered free market. That is actually what you are seeing. So the cognitive dissonance of transposing that reality onto something that isn't happening because it makes you feel emotionally safer
Right.
in the face of this failure of the systems you believe in. To me, it makes me feel hopeless because I don't think you can reason with those people. In fact, that is an assumption. I just don't think you can reason with a lot of people. And so then I ask myself, well, given my assumption, and perhaps other people, I'm open to being convinced otherwise. I wish someone would convince me otherwise. But, my view is that you just cannot reason with a lot of people. I can't say most people, who knows, but a lot of people you can't reason with. So what do the rest of us do? What do we do when we can't reason with a lot of people, even when it's in their self-interest? Our perspective would be in their self-interest to share. But what do we do? We can't reason with those people, and you're not going to reason with people in power who are beneficiaries of the system unless they have a real expansive moral imagination, which few of them do. So what's the next step? That's kind of what I.
Well, I think related to that too, and I'm like sorry, not sorry to anybody listening or watching today who's like, because this is something we talked about while we were muted too, is like there's this idea that we should separate politics or something from our mental wellness, from like our whatever. But that's absurd. Like that you should separate politics from anything. They were like, we don't talk about politics when politics are just the expression of the material conditions that affect our lives. And
Yeah,
so like
actually, let me just say, so this to me, like people always ask me, like, what's the difference between social work and psychology? I think it's this, I think which is something I love about the field of social work, is that we don't pretend that somehow what goes on inside your mind or even between people, like in a social psychological sense, is not influenced by the
hmm,
structure of our society and material reality. That those things, my view, and I think
wow.
the view of the field, is that those things are inextricably linked, and it's just a fantasy to pretend they're not. So anyway.
That's profound. I've never heard that. That's very profound to me. I feel like that's in this that tiny phrase. I'm like, wow, that fundamentally shifts my understanding of what I'm interested in when I talk about like mental health or mental wellness. Is that like it's I because I've long had an inkling. I'm not interested in psychology. I'm not interested in the psychology that is parodied in What About Bob, of like the person who lays on a couch, and that just doesn't fucking make sense to me. I'm interested in the reality of my experience and how I can affect that and bring that in sync with things. And then also the reality of the world that's affecting my experience. Like, like one thing I think that's hard to navigate for me still, this is like the eternal navigation, I believe, of any kind of uh, attempt to affect my own cognition or mental health, is like the line between one, which seems to have been a fairly, at least a battle that's being won more and more in the discourse, of validating people's experiences, of saying like not just like toughen up or it's all in your head, saying like no, it's fucking real what you're going through, and there are real reasons that you're going through this, like, which is to me material realities of whether they're more immediate traumas in your personal life or things that exist systemically that are not healthy for people's brains and spirits and bodies or whatever. And then but then the second half of it is the line of saying like here's what you can change and affect, and then you can. And I think that was what I was going to ask you about your thoughts on, and what we do, because this is something I do feel like I'm being faced with a lot lately, questions from my community, my friends, my loved ones, close people to me. And especially I would say like those normies who are like the good faith normies, the ones who are going like, whoa, all the things I thought actually are pretty fucked up. And what do we do now? And basically, my thought is like facing material conditions. And I'm nervous to ask this question because there might not be a very happy answer coming. I know you've like worked in social work in fucking like Los Angeles County. It's like, so there might not be a great answer here. But like facing the material realities of what seems fairly hopeless at the moment, and like we're all just small people. What can we change? What can we do? And being faced with like I don't fucking know. Maybe I can't stop. I definitely can't do anything about the GOP, and now it seems like I can't even do anything about the Democratic establishment. And maybe this is just going to march forward in this way. And this feeling of just hopelessness of this I don't know. I will say I will offer this kernel of the thing that occurs to me is just to act locally, get it smaller and smaller, just affect positively whatever I can in my small realm, and that might just be bringing loaves of good sourdough that my James Beard chef best friend makes to my neighbors, but like as opposed to these like sad little like squashed
Uh,
loaves, everyone making their best effort. No, but you know what I mean. But so what do we do
yeah,
with that
I do. Yeah,
hopelessness? Because I think that hopelessness is the reason people revert to the thing we were talking about, the cognitive dissonance thing. Is like I'd prefer, rather than this murky hopelessness with no answer, no idea how to fucking affect things, I'd prefer to go back to just at least I had a sense that things made sense before, and I'm going to stay in those beliefs.
yeah. I mean, I think they're to kind of move up levels. I think it's kind of start low. I think it's really hard because what a lot of people do. Well, okay, so much of our kind of intellectual discourse now takes place online. Like that's the new salon. It
Yeah.
used to take place in living rooms and then in like social clubs and whatever, but now it takes place online. And we are like, by the very nature of those tools, forced into like truncated communication and like 100 whatever the fuck it is, 180 characters or whatever. So you see people just sloganeering, like
Mm-hmm.
slogans are not discourse, and slogans are inherently non-analytical. So I think that's one thing, is when you find yourself thinking in terms of slogans, to force yourself to like do a causal analysis. Like
Yeah.
what are you actually claiming? What is the claim that you're making, and what's the evidence in support of the claim? Like that's what I tried to, like I was about to retweet this photo of like all of the large healthcare corporation CEOs' salaries, which is like a great photo. It has all their salaries and where they were. But then I was like, actually, so I replied and I was like, hey, do you have a source for any of these numbers?
Mm-hmm.
And just stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of one
Which, by the
one thing.
way, to me is part of why, and I fall into that trap too. Like it's hard to not do those things.
Well,
I
it takes advantage of our natural inclinations. I mean, there's a reason why these approaches are being A/B tested on millions of people all the time. So it makes sense that they're very good at getting us to do these things. Like retweet, for
yeah,
example.
there's I don't want to derail, but there's that this does make me think. There's somebody said, Ida Maria said, Greta Thunberg said something like, people talk about getting back to normal, but normal was a crisis. We shouldn't go back. Well, like 100%. But like on that note of like, there's somebody on, I think they're named Brad Trammell on Instagram, and it's like an art criticism account, but it's like from I don't know if you could be like working class art critic or something like that. It's very funny. It's very online. It's obviously like poking fun a lot of the time at like establishment art practices, gallery art practices, things like this, the art education practices. And he made this one long thread one time about art versus politics, and that basically like art has no effect on like that maybe once upon a time, but now it's been kind of like proven out that art is not going to achieve some political goal. Like the fact that you could have some Ricky Gervais or something in front of this room of elites, like saying all these, yeah. And I'm not saying I'm a big fan of Ricky Gervais. I think he's got a lot of issues, but saying stuff to their face that's true, and
Like
but
when he does that.
and they just laugh about it. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay, so this isn't going to change anything, but that the question should become like, because when you said that thing about sloganeering, I thought to myself, like, yes, that's true. That's also why I think memes and like are basically haiku. You're like poetry, like is what we retreat into, is something that says like I'm not interested. Like basically the thought at the end of the Brad Trammell thing was we should think about what art can accomplish that politics can't. That like what is art for
Yeah,
versus, you know what I mean? Like just
I
as a
do. I mean, I do. I think, I don't know, I'm a little more cynical about it. Like, I think the reason why all of Hollywood can laugh at like pretty fucked up truths about themselves is the same reason why it's okay to make fun of white people, is because it doesn't threaten
right.
their or our positions of power.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't threaten
Right,
power,
right.
to make fun of like, oh, white people are boring. Like, I can laugh at that because it doesn't threaten my privilege and power.
Right.
It's the
No, I
fucking
think that's true, but I guess what I'm thinking is like as we move forward, maybe in the state, because I don't think of it as like I'm like maybe this is just getting back around to this question. I didn't really let you finish about which I'd like you to go back to about like what do we do to empower ourselves and to hopefully have some positive effect, not just on our own personal well-being, but not in a Novocaine sense, in a sense of like, let's treat the wound and change things, is like, I don't know. It almost feels like the attempt to use art or politics or whatever to change an established thing is meaningless. Like, you're not going to, because everybody's just deeper entrenches in their things. And you really only have to focus on like what's new, like a new radical base or something like that. Like what the possibility of what you can create in your own life that's, not convincing a machine that exists to be something it's not.
Yeah, I feel you. I mean, I don't know. I kind of think that, okay, so we think about like what are the most effective like tools of power, and I think art can be one. And like I think art can change attitudes in the sense that, there's good evidence to show there was like a soap opera introduced in, I believe it was in Brazil, that talked about safe sex practices, and that was associated with the measurable increase in safe sex practices like among viewers. So, there are ways of like disseminating information to people to change cultural norms through art. Like I do think, and now that medium is like TV or film. So I do think, and probably now like newer tools like YouTube videos and influencers and whatnot. So I do think that can have some kind of effect on the culture. But the problem is that like it comes back to who gets to disseminate and decide, and it's just we know now it's not a democratic process. I mean,
But don't you think that's part of like the power of the internet is like this co-created strange, like
yeah,
the under.
I do, but I don't think it's a. I mean, the kind of fantasy is that it's a totally egalitarian marketplace where people vote on what's best and those things rise to the top. And I just don't think that's the case. I think it's.
Right.
I'm open to changing my view about that again when shown evidence. But to me, I think it's people who have the most money and support are amplified,
Right.
and within small groups. It's not like one normal curve. There are all these kind of subgroups, like small curves, and you know there are moneyed interests that amplify voices within those small groups. So I think that seems to be what's happening.
Yeah.
Um, and so what does that tell us? Well, it's the same thing that it's been from the dawn of time, that money, capital, is really the tool of the like most effective tool of power. So I think that yes, we have to do what we can in our spheres, but I mean we have to like be present in local politics. So like my colleague
Yeah.
Robin, who I work with on this youth homelessness intervention, she is like this tireless advocate for engaging in local politics. And I mean, really, from the time that I've known her, she's always like, anytime there's like a local election in LA, she's harassing everybody about it to go and vote. And people don't, like a handful of people vote for city council, like thousands,
Yeah.
in a city with millions. It's just crazy. And like these are the real decision makers who
Right.
affect our daily lives, and like nobody fucking pays any attention or gets engaged with that. So I think local politics is one, but I don't know.
Hmm.
I actually think that we're in a period where we don't have a good template for mass structural change. We don't have a good template. I mean, like we thought we had one in the kind of Tahrir Square revolution. Like there were books written about how social media had become like effective tools for organizing revolution.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, what happened is that those tools got co-opted by the government for mass surveillance, and now we have another dictatorship in
That's
Egypt.
true.
You know?
That's true.
So
And that's also
that
like,
little blip on the radar didn't work out the way people thought it would.
that's also like like the Bloomberg campaign paying all the meme aggregator accounts to make Bloomberg memes. Remember that, like there was a week of like the Bloomberg, every big meme account was like,
Like those aggregators' lives. They all bought beach houses with
well,
that.
I mean, I was like, there was a part of me that's kind of like the chaotic The chaotic good. I realized last night that I'm definitely just chaotic good. It's like turns out that's my alignment. But that like that sort of I feel like my chaotic good approach to that stuff was just like whenever people are like, ah, don't take evil money or something like that, you're like, well, like money's money, and sometimes you
Yeah.
can take the evil money. It's like Robin Hood. You like have to, but it's like a very I almost like didn't begrudge those people.
All money is evil money. I mean, all
See,
money is
that's what
evil
I
money.
think. That is what I think. But it's like whatever. As long as I don't think it's like I don't think it's intellectually honest to criticize people who your only option to survive is to take the scraps from the Lord's table to
Yeah,
like
of
not
course.
do it, until we have like a new
In a heartbeat.
situation. Huh?
I said I would take it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, yeah. It's like what can you do? But so okay, I do want to try to get something positive out of this out of you. I'm like not like again, not toxic positivity, not that I need positive. I'm just like I
Yeah,
want tools. I want solutions. I want things. So like
yeah, yeah.
faced with an
Positive.
impossible situation, what do I do? What do I to not be fucking miserable and to not just put my fucking head in the sand?
Yeah. Okay. So here's what I will just say. Like, I think one of the things about toxic positivity is that it proposes easy solutions for difficult problems that don't work.
Right.
So, to me, you know, positivity is not easy. It's hard. It's hard. It's probably hard. Like, I remember when I was living in northern India, my teacher, this monk who was my teacher, I forget what it was, but I asked him like, which of these two things should I do? A decision that seemed like difficult and important at the time, and he just asked me, well, I'll just tell you what my teacher told me. Uh, which one is harder for you? And I was like, oh fuck, yeah, this one. And he's like, well, that's probably the one that you should do. So
Really? Like that was like flat out was just like do the challenging one.
yeah, yeah, that's what he said. Now, of course, that won't apply in every situation. In
Right.
this case, it did like kind of resonate with me, like, oh yeah, this is like the one that's more in accordance with my values, even though it's harder. But yeah, I do think there are, so even though I don't think we have a template for change at this point, like
Yeah.
big change, I do think, yeah, uh, holding yourself to a higher standard when it comes to kind of being scientifically minded, like looking for evidence and just getting comfortable with being wrong. We're wrong all the time. We overestimate how right we are. So I think just being comfortable being wrong and learning to say, "Oh, I was wrong about this," and change your view in the face of evidence. I think that's a really useful skill, and to model that, just to model that for
Yeah.
everyone in your life.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think, yeah, to be compassionate and decent to each other is really important. To understand that validation and acceptance and accepting reality is not enough. It's the starting point for action. Like that's another one that I think is really important. And then I think to be
That's
involved
good.
locally, to try to make change locally in the sense of like voting for your city council members, your judges. Um,
It's so hard to like I don't know. There's not a lot of resources. I actually literally asked a friend this week. There's one called LA Podcast. They said listen to that. That's a good one. They just talk about like local LA politics and what's going on, what happens with
if you're
council
in
members.
LA, bug my friend Robin Petering at lensco.com. Just email her through.
Lensco. Yeah, I follow her on Twitter. She she often has like good stuff. Robin Petering has like really good.
Yeah,
There's just very few resources. I feel like
yeah.
it's odd that like national politics seem easier to get info and understanding of than
Well,
local.
because who is making money talking about national politics? A lot of people. I mean,
Yeah,
who's making money talking about local politics? There's just less money
yeah,
in it.
yeah. That's
So,
true. That's true. I don't
so
know.
I don't know.
Crazy. Well, yeah, so I don't know. So you said something in there that I think was like really interesting, which is like that like I'm paraphrasing, but I want you to repeat it if I got it wrong. Was something that like feeling like good wellness isn't like the goal; it's like the starting point to be able to do stuff.
Yeah. Well, this I think is a concept that I run into a lot, where it's you know first of all, validation and acceptance. Like when you finally get to a place where you're like, okay, I accept that like these are the problems I'm having, whether it's you know like intermittent major depressive episodes or an underlying anxiety. You know, like okay, I finally accept that this is the problem, and maybe you're able to like disclose that to people. but that's not like you're not done. You're just at the very beginning now, right? So it's awesome. Like you getting to the beginning is a big deal. Like if you don't get to the beginning, you can't fucking go anywhere, right? So you have to
Yeah.
get to the beginning, like the starting line. You have to. The first job is to just get there, to like get to the beginning of the. I don't like the race analogy, but just to start, because like take a stroll. It's not a race.
Mm-hmm.
To get to the beginning. But once you've gotten to the beginning, which demands radical acceptance of the truth of your situation, then you need to do the things that will get you to your goals, that will help you live in a way that's consistent with your values. Um, like, and that requires another set of skills, and I think too often, both in mental health and in general, we think, okay, once I've like told the truth, to myself and accepted reality, and that I'm like done now, and it's the opposite of that, I think.
Yeah, that's back when I was first getting into like fitness and stuff like that, like a decade or so ago, which really came out of martial arts. I was doing martial arts stuff and I wanted more GPP for that. I call it the daily preparation. That's like how I started to think of it, was like a sort of like a sort of spiritual practice. I don't think there's like separating spiritual and physical really that much. Just like I say on this podcast, it's called My Good Bad Brain. Like I don't think there's a separation between the physical and mental either. Like it's
There
all
isn't. There isn't. I
yeah.
mean, what would that separation be? Where is the non-brain based mind? I mean, what is that?
Right. Personally believe in it as like an act of faith. I believe like whatever makes us human is like, I think of this vessel as like, this is the TV set and the signal is coming from somewhere else, like whatever consciousness is. But that's me. That's like my personal, you
But
know?
it's beyond an act of faith. It's an act of knowledge. I mean, there might be a mind that is entirely separate from our brain, but it doesn't have anything to do with our experience now, because our
Right.
experience now is so mediated physically. So maybe that thing could
Yes.
exist if I'm agnostic about it, but it's not what we're experiencing now.
Yes.
You
And
know,
that's how I always feel. It's like, either way, I just, for some reason, that thought brings me comfort and I like to think about it. I feel like I've had moments of such absolute certainty about it that it brought me a lot of comfort. Like I was like, oh, life is eternal. Like that's like whatever. But that's just, neither here nor there. Was the because you can also be like, a moment is eternal. I sort of feel that way as well. That like, this very, but that like this I don't know, the sense that we're I literally just fucking like totally disappeared. Do you know what I mean? What happened?
yeah,
What was I just saying? I was just saying
we're talking about.
eternal moment. That's because my consciousness went off into the cosmos. That there is no experience that I can describe to you or anything else that is not this one. That is not physical. That is not something that comes through the lens of my brain, the chemicals of my like blood-brain barrier, the
Right.
molecules smashing around inside of me. It's like a physics problem. Most of this experience, but that there's a sense. I had this. I felt very profound experience one day, like a year or so ago, about that preparation thing. Is you're like, what am I doing this for? Like, what was I doing all this martial arts, or like, well, I picked them jujitsu, right? A martial art that is like dealing with a human body, a physical human body that is non-compliant. All the lifting and strange exercise and things like that. What is that for? And like so many people fantasize, they're like these apocalypse fantasists, about like the day all these ninjas are gonna like fall out of the ceiling and you're gonna be like, time to fight these ninja terrorists or something like that. But like in reality, it was like my mom she was in the hospital and she had some medical thing where like she almost died. Like there was like a suture broke in from the thing that was very like standard, and like the practice, like the procedure she had was standard. It shouldn't have happened. It was like a bad suture, and she got like this embolism. She almost like choked basically on her own swelling and almost died. They got her to the hospital. She was okay. She was in the hospital. So we flew out. We were hanging out with her in this hospital, and at one point, because she had to stay in bed, it was like very, like she had to go to the bathroom. So I helped walk her to the bathroom, and we like with my brother or so, I got her and while just standing up off the toilet after she was like done and I was coming back in to help her, as she stood up, she just blacked out. Like I'd never seen anything like it. It was terrifying. Like just sandbag, totally disappeared. It was terrifying. I've never seen it happen in a human body like up close like that. Like totally just out on her feet. And it was like out of nowhere, I I caught her and you could catch her, and it was like I've never felt a human body that's that limp either. And she's, and like it was very challenging. It was probably the hardest physical feat I've done in my life. But you were like the difference between my mom falling and hitting her head on the ground, totally limp and unconscious on the tile, and who knows what that could kill somebody. You don't know. And not was because I had spent a decade or so doing this stupid martial art, dealing with non-compliant bodies, doing all this weird lifting. So it was like the reason I was like preparing myself for whatever wasn't ninjas falling out. It ended up being like, hey, catch your mom, like catch, and hopefully prevent brain damage or whatever the hell could happen. And, lift her and get her back to the bed. And it was like crazy. And I feel like that kind of thing is like, I don't know, that feels very related to this, like, how do I get to the starting line, quote unquote, whatever we're going to call it, the base of the mountain, whatever my mountain in life is going to be, and why? Like, what am I doing in my daily small moves to be well, to be like whatever that feels like it is, and hopefully doing it without anxiety. I mean, someone just asked the thing, any sanity advice for people that live alone? Oh, we'll talk about that in a second. But like this sort of like, if the baseline is so that I'm ready to act, like what am I, you know what I mean? Like if that's, maybe that's part of the mindset, is less about like, maybe that's part of the way you'd feel like less insane in the face of impossible odds, is saying like, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know what the path is. I don't have an answer. I just feel like I should be ready. And if I'm doing my best to prepare myself for whatever that thing is, then maybe I'll at least feel a little sane, like that I'm
Yeah,
trying.
yeah. So this makes me kind of think of a couple of sort of assumptions that underlie at least like the work that I've done that I think is, and I think these are important assumptions. So, like all organisms are kind of at root have two drives, right? It's move towards pleasure, move away from pain. Like that's like, from amoeba all the way up. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the, you know, basic physiological drive. And so with humans, it's like, well, we want to maximize our happiness. And I think that's good and true. Like we should try to be happy. Of course, what the fuck else, why we got to try to be happy. But there are going to be times when just happiness isn't in the cards, and those might be long stretches or short stretches. And this kind of comes back to something we've talked about before on this podcast, which is as human beings, we can kind of we have like a higher order like um, kind of principle that we can adhere to. So while I do think it's important to move towards pleasure and move away from pain, even kind of over and above that, we have this ability to move towards our values, to move towards the things that we think are important, our personal kind of values. And we can do that independent of whether we're feeling good in the moment. Certainly it helps to feel good.
Yeah.
When you're not feeling good, and you've like done a lot of work to try to feel good, and it's just like it ain't happening right now. It's kind of like that actions before, or kind of like activation before motivation, kind of
Right.
truism of activation. Like get activated, and that'll kind of drag motivation behind you.
Yeah.
If you act in accordance with your values, typically feeling decent will come behind that. So figuring out like what are your broad values and what are they in particular situations that you're running into, and then acting in a way that's consistent with your values even when you don't feel good, that is going to in general elevate your well-being.
Yeah.
So I think
That's
that's a
good.
really, and it's kind of to kind of connect it back to the story that you told, is even if you don't feel like exercising one day, you know that like being prepared physically is important to you. That's a value.
Yeah.
So you might do something so that you're acting in a way that's consistent with your values, even if it's not giving you enjoyment in the moment.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
will say like this past month of doing the quarantine calisthenics thing, which I'll do it again today at noon if anybody wants to join. Well, do it at noon at my Instagram live. Has like I hadn't had a very consistent physical practice prior to that. I had fallen off, and it's like really changed. It just that's another thing I'm not really taking into my account of how fine I'm feeling in quarantine. I guess it's like because I'm not every day, but that's like normal. But that I like to think of my body as like a pet. It's like a dog that I have to take care of, and that like that's just the reality of it. If I don't take it for walks, if I don't feed it okay, if I don't give it like pets and stuff like that, then like it gets fucking shitty and irritable and depressed, and it like then I have to deal with the results of it like shitting on my bed, because it's upset. Which related to someone asked any sanity advice for people that live alone and miss hugging people. Get a cat, a body pillow, find a neighbor who's also alone, and agree to be quarantine buddies. Um, that's actually a very good question. I think a lot of people are. Do you have any thoughts about that? Because obviously, like physical contact is like a pretty essential part of human animal like wealth,
It's
right?
essential. It is essential. Yeah. I mean, look, so if you are able to safely, without, violating good quarantine practice, get some contact with someone, I think that's ideal, but you may not be able to do that. And if you can't do that, I think that, unfortunately, it's like the tried and true stuff that people are doing. So if you can do some kind of like video connection with people who you care about, that's really important. So you have some kind of social contact. That's one. And then two is movement and exercise. Like if you can go outside, especially if you can go like into nature without violating good quarantine safety, I think that's can be really helpful. So nature. And if you can't go into nature, doing some vigorous physical activity to tire your body.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That's going to be really important too.
That
Uh,
actually that was I would say in like some of my most dire mental states in the past when I've like been really I would say like in like super duper crisis mode. I do think that physical like practices just exercising myself to a point of just absolute exhaustion was like one of the like a life-saving tactic.
Yeah, I mean, I think look, there are some things that we know release endogenous opiates like endorphins, and physical exercise is one. Masturbation is another. I'm sure I don't have to remind people to do that when they're alone, but those things do release endorphins. So I think you know do that stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's a pretty good note to end on, I guess. What to do at the end of the world? Just fucking jack off.
Let it rip. Yep.
No, that's funny. Well, I don't know. I think like that's pretty good. Someone said their sound just went out. Well, whatever. I think our sound's going. You know what? I think we could call it though too. We had a pretty good. It's 10:54. We struggled at the beginning with the thing. I don't know. I hope that this. I hope that this like whenever people listen to this, I get so nervous about like the toxic positivity thing. I have the voice in my head, which is like, please just don't stress me out. Don't be stressing me out. Da 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 da. This, you know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't want to be that. The whole trigger warning concept, which I know there was also like a study thing that came out that was said like trigger warnings actually stress people out more. That like that it I feel like it's like if a baby falls down on their face and you go, oh, they like start crying. But if they fall on your face, you go, oh, you okay? They're just like, oh yeah, I'm fine. Like they respond to your.
I'm not a big. I mean, I am only in favor of the trigger warning in very, very limited circumstances. I'm not a big supporter of that.
Okay. Yeah, but you know what I mean? But this sort of like I don't know. I guess you said it earlier, is like baseline is like it's not about denying the problems that exist. It's about like acknowledging them and then approaching them with like knowledge and
Yeah, the reason I feel like it's certainly we don't want to be like fucking, on purpose stressing people out for no reason. That's like just shitty
right.
behavior. But I think stress causes adaptation if you have the tools to adapt. But
Oh,
without stress, you don't get any adaptation. So
right.
a little bit of stress with the tools to convert that stress into adaptation is good. So I
Yeah.
think hopefully if to the extent that we raise stressful topics, they're accompanied by the tools that you need to convert that stress into adaptation. So, trying to avoid stress, I mean, certainly that's impossible to do, and I don't think it's good to do either. Like look at
Yeah.
people who have very, very low stress in their lives when then they're exposed to a bigger stressor, like they perform horribly, and so we don't want to be those people. Um,
That's a really great like just sort of attitude to adopt about stress that I don't think I've heard anyone actually say that stress induces adaptation. Like that's the evolutionary thing about it. As long as you have
yeah,
the tools to deal with it. And then if you do have the tools to deal with it, like we discussed a bunch of them here, like it's exercising, it's getting involved in local politics, it's like learning more about your, whatever the topic is that's stressing you.
Physiological relaxation, like everyone should just have in their back pocket knowing how to do deep breathing and knowing how to do progressive muscle relaxation. And you could just type both of those phrases into YouTube and you'll get a million
Okay,
hits.
I'll bug you to give me a favorite one this week, especially for the progressive muscle relaxation, because I think I've done it without knowing it was called that, but I want to find one because that seems like a useful thing to always have.
Very good one.
Say it one more time.
Oh, I'll find a good progressive
Oh,
muscle relaxation script. Yeah.
okay, cool. I'm trying to get better at A, not over talking in general, and B, like on this thing, I really have to. Whenever we're talking at the same time, I like can't. I'm like I can't understand, so I'm trying to just shut the fuck up more, which is intermittent at best. All right, man. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for being here on this week. Thank you guys for joining us. If you got over here to the YouTube one, I have enjoyed this. I think it's a little more delay, but let me know what you think. It seems maybe it's easier for people to engage. Maybe we'll just keep trying this one. Might as well. We tried Mixer for like a month, and maybe we'll try the YouTube one. Might as well because it's like we got it.
Yeah.
Hey man, thanks a lot. Check out mygoodbadbrain.com if you want shirts or anything like that. Patreon.com/mygoodbadbrain if you want to throw any bucks at the show. That's helpful. I don't know. What do you want to plug anything?
I don't have any plugs, but I will find that script because I think it's good. I'll find the progressive muscle relaxation and a deep breathing like video that
Cool.
people can follow along with because fuck, we all could use
Yeah, seriously.
days.
Quarantine calisthenics. If anybody wants to on that note, if you feel like exercising, I've been doing it every day at noon on Instagram Live at my Jarrett_sleeper, and hey, it's been cool. Like yesterday, someone like there's some regulars. Some people are like calling it the quarantine. They're like recognizing each other on there. It's neat. It's really fun. We're done. I haven't ever gone over an hour, which is amazing. It's usually about 30 minutes of actual exercise, even including all the talking. We're usually out by 12:45, but no later than 1, as long as I start on time. All right, so we'll see you guys at noon if you want to do that. Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Dr. Nick. I'll talk to you guys later.